Well, you've touched on it to a degree. He made so many promises. We thought that he was going to be, I shouldn't say this at Christmas time, but the next Messiah. I shouldn't say this at Christmas time, but the next Messiah.
We cannot continue to rely only on our military in order to achieve the national security objectives that we've set. In order to achieve the national security objectives that we've set.
Can a microscopic tag be implanted in a person's body to track his every movement? There's actual discussion about that. You will rule on that, mark my words, before your tenure is over. Can brain scans be used to determine whether a person is inclined toward criminality or violent behavior? You will rule on that, mark my words, before your tenure is over.
We've got to have a civilian national security force that's just as powerful, just as strong, just as well funded.
Our conversation, we're going to have to change our traditions, our history. We're going to have to move into a different place.
We have to change our history and our traditions.
Welcome back to Viewpoint. I'm Maya Berry. My next guest is Mike German. He's a policy counsel for national security and privacy at the American Civil Liberties Union here in Washington. 16-year veteran of federal law enforcement. He served as a special agent with the FBI and as a counterterrorism instructor at the FBI National Academy. I have so much to talk to you about, Mike, today, but I want to start with the more general Patriot Act piece of this. We just all had the post 9/11, the 10-year anniversary of 9/11. Right. As you reflect back on where we are today, what do you think are sort of the most salient issues that we have to deal with this idea of compromising constitutional rights, civil liberties to national security issues? What do you think are sort of the key ones?
Well, you know, based on my experience in law enforcement, I've always found that to be a false paradigm, that giving up your civil liberties does not actually improve your security posture. In fact, if the government is spending time investigating innocent people, that's wasting resources that should be directed in more focused investigations against people who are actually a threat. So part of the problem that I've seen, you know, and seeing this from both sides of the issue, is that we've moved away from a paradigm where the government is required to have some rational, factual basis for targeting somebody in investigation to a paradigm where suspicionless investigation is allowed. And what we've seen is those authorities continue to expand and continue to expand without any appropriate oversight or controls being put in place. And one of the things that's extremely frustrating for me is little by little, you know, substantial evidence of abuse has come out. The Inspector General did a number of 5 separate reports on the Patriot Act abuses. But we don't have any comprehensive examination of whether these authorities are actually effective in keeping us safer. You know, we know that they're abusive, we know that they can be abused, and yet we don't have any evidence to suggest they're actually helping the government focus on real threats. A provision of the Patriot Act is being interpreted secretly by the government in a way that's vastly more expansive than the American public understands. So there's a secret interpretation of the law that is allowing the government to, in the words of these senators, collect information about wholly innocent Americans. And you know, it's completely inappropriate that the American public is not even allowed to know the extent of what the government is doing and how it is interpreting the law. You know, I mean, there's understandable secrecy around how certain tools are used, but we should at least know what the legal limitations of the government's power are. And those are the audits that have uncovered the widespread abuse. The problem was that now that we have the evidence of abuse, there didn't seem to be enough will in the administration or in Congress to tighten, you know, even the few provisions that we have ample evidence of abuse now because of the Inspector General reports, you know, even the narrow changes that we were hoping to make were ignored, and it was passed without any reform. So it's highly problematic. I think there's still a lot of fear. You know, there's a lot of It is still just not understanding how these tools are being used, and the inability to get the FBI and the other intelligence agencies to come clean about how they're using them.
Her home, she says, has become a house of horrors.
I feel that I've lost my mind, I've lost my life.
Incident reports from law enforcement tell the tale. Numerous break-ins at the address, vandalism to her car, her motorcycle, her computer. Verbeth believes she's being targeted.
Everything, they just went through everything.
But sheriff's detectives had little to go on because the vandals, though often destructive, stole nothing. Even from her portable safe, drilled into and torn apart, the contents, the jewelry, remained untouched.
He told me that because I was already there in his house, I would be the next victim, that I was going to be stopped.
Verbeth found the doctor's prophecy to be correct. She suffered months of oddness.
Coming in through the front door, and I touch the doorknob, and it just falls into pieces.
Lights left on, doors open, furniture moved, her clothes dryer disassembled. Her friends say they noticed the strange happenings. They tell the I-Team they even witnessed a gas oven for the time Verbeth and a friend say they were stalked at a mall.
I saw him following us to several stores, and I would see the man close to us, looking at us.
The girls had the presence of mind to snap a photo with their phone. Verbeth says all these happenings culminated in an assault. The 39-year-old believes someone drugged the food in her home and returned later to rape her.
I know something happened to me because a woman knows.
She filed a report and was briefly hospitalized with signs of sexual assault. Dr. Hall says what Verbeth describes is known as gang stalking. Indeed, he writes about it in his book, A New Breed, Satellite Terrorism.
We cannot continue to rely only on our military in order to achieve the national security objectives that we've set. We've got to have a civilian national security force that's just as powerful, just as strong, just as well funded.
Tonight, police call it bullying on steroids. We're talking about gang stalking, but it actually has nothing to do with the gangs that you first think of. Central Coast News reporter Candace Wynn learned more about the trend and how it's getting more dangerous because of the internet.
It makes me feel afraid.
Lawrence Gazzino claims his neighbors are gang stalking him. He said for the last year and a half, he's been systematically followed by a group of people. At one point, he said they climbed on his roof to harass him. Gazzino said he's developed a paranoia that's devastated his relationships with friends and, worst of all, family.
That's the worst part of it. If it was me, I would take action.
Santa Cruz Police Lieutenant Larry Richards said police are becoming more aware of gang stalking because of cyberbullying. But what is gang stalking?
Basically, the victims could be driving their car or talking on their phones or walking the streets when a group of people try to systematically terrorize
the FBI has an entire army of people whose only job is to do surveillance, whether tracking a terrorist suspect or mobster or potential spy. NPR's Dina Temple-Raston found out that the secret is all about blending in.
But real surveillance is much more subtle. The agent in charge of the Special Operations Division of the FBI in New York is Todd Letcher. He says if his team is doing the job right, you won't even know they're there.
When they come out of the bodega with their cup of coffee, they don't see where we are. They don't see our people, or our people look so ordinary that they just look over them.
So that guy with the flat-top haircut who looks like a cop, well, he might indeed be following you, and the FBI might want you to think he's following you, but what you probably won't see is the roster of other people who are with him. Those people, the members of the FBI's Special Surveillance Group, or SSGs, don't want you to know their names. That ghostliness is part of...
We've got to have a civilian national security force that's just as powerful, just as strong, just as well funded.
We're going to have to change our conversation. We're going to have to change our traditions, our history. We're going to have to move into a different place.
We have to change our history and our traditions.
I just want to bring out the fact that vaccinations can also cause violent behavior. And there's certain areas of the brain that, in fact, lead you to become violent. They're actually researching to see what areas of the brain they can affect to make people violent. Once you get injected with viruses, If they go to your brain, they cause vaccine-induced encephalitis, and depending on what part of the brain is damaged will determine what symptoms you have. The parts of the brain that control behavior and make you violent are primarily the limbic system, especially the amygdala.
In the 1960s, Professor Jose Delgado took a normally hostile bull and implanted electrodes into its brain. Electrodes that could be activated by a radio transmitter. His objective was to see if stimulation of the bull's midbrain could short-circuit the rage signals, stopping the bull before it reached the matador. After the bull had recovered from the implantation and in mid-charge, the button was pressed. The bull's aggression ceased instantly. A clearer experiment was performed with cats. In this classic example, the hypothalamus, the rhythm maker, was implanted with electrodes. Could it be responsible not just for rhythms, but also for rage? The switch is turned. Then the switch is turned off. So indeed, the hypothalamus does control certain types of aggression.
Waking up to such debilitating pain that you cannot walk.
It often goes undiagnosed, and anyone can be a victim. Tonight, CBS 2 explores this mystery pain.
I just got up one morning and the pain just started.
It struck without warning, excruciating leg pain, leaving Daphne Cuevas completely powerless.
I can't eat. I can't function.
I can't walk for 10 minutes. Once 10 minutes, I'm done.
Alexandra Analoro has the same debilitating pain. It's so bad, her leg sometimes shakes uncontrollably. The 21-year-old says she can barely walk.
There's days that I cry a lot.
Well, to paraphrase Winston Churchill, the government is either at your feet or at your throat. And in some cases, they're in your head. We're talking about weapons of mass control. And we all know that the government is all about controlling us, even though it appears we have less and less control of the government.
A little unusual story. I am an anesthesiologist in San Antonio, Texas. I had a girl come to me complaining of being stalked and getting voices in her head. Did a little checking. I had known the family, I had known the girl for some time. No history of mental illness, no drug history in the past. So I gave her the benefit of the doubt. Before sending her to a psychiatrist. Did some checking, did some bugging of her place with audio. She'd requested no video cameras, but she did allow audio and had some people driving around checking on her. And as it turns out, she was being stalked by a former FBI agent that runs a private investigative agency in San Antonio. They were breaking into her house, putting Rohypnol in bottled water and other food substances in her place.
And what does that do, Rohypnol?
Rohypnol is a date rape drug. It blocks your memory. And we're essentially sexually assaulting her, using her as a sex slave. But the interesting thing about the way they were doing it, and which gets into the electromagnetic technology, is they were breaking in, putting Rohypnol in the bottled water, and subliminally controlling her to drink where the drug was placed.
Wow. Wow, that's interesting. So when did this happen?
This all happened prior to 2006.
Because this has been an open secret for some time. It's something that's not talked about very much, although we do have articles here from the Washington Post. We've got articles from Wired Magazine. They've been talking about this here and then in articles since the early 2000s. So you can find some articles going back earlier than that even. And we've got pretty much every branch of the military has got their own little projects, as well as commercial applications.
Oh yeah, mind control technology is one of the most common crimes, at least vocalized or complained about on the internet today. It seems to be getting the least amount of coverage in the major media.
Wow.
So that's why when we went to the police and had the identities of the stalkers, there's no way to prove the electromagnetic technology, but we could prove the stalking and we could prove the sexual assault. And we're told by the police that, well, the guy doing this to you is former FBI, he's a private investigator, he stalks people for a living, that's what he does. And she had no memory.
Sexually assaults people for a living, that's what he does.
And she has no memory of the sexual assaults due to the Rohypnol, at least not good enough memory to to bring a case. And it's like the police told us, it's not what you know, it's what you can prove.
Yeah, it's also who you know.
And who you know. So the next best thing, I thought, you know what, I need to write all this down in a book. Of course, the names have slightly been changed since we couldn't bring any of them to prison. Once the book came out, then I saw that I was immediately inundated with thousands of other people voicing the same complaints of organized stalking, of directed energy weapons attacks, burning, twitching, severe headaches, blurred vision, as well as hearing the voices of their perpetrators in their head or in their surroundings.
Got a Fox News alert for you right now. The Associated Press is reporting that the Navy Yard shooter down in Washington, D.C., Aaron Alexis, was apparently treated for serious mental issues by the VA because he heard voices, among other things.
Newport police tell us they came here to the Marriott a month ago for a harassment call. According to the police report, the man we now know as the Navy Yard shooter said people were following him. He was hearing voices and they were putting vibrations in his body to keep him awake. Newport police say they responded to the Marriott Hotel early in the morning on August 7th. Aaron Alexis told police he was a naval contractor who traveled often. Alexis told the officer he had a verbal fight with someone at the airport in Virginia as he was getting on a flight to Rhode Island. And that person sent 3 people to follow him and keep him awake by talking to him and sending vibrations into his body. Alexis left a Middletown hotel, went to a Navy base hotel, but still heard the voices. He escaped to a 3rd hotel, the Marriott, but the voices continued. Alexis told the officer the 3 individuals were speaking to him through the floor and using some sort of microwave machine to send vibrations through the ceiling, penetrating his body so he cannot fall asleep. A Newport police sergeant contacted Naval Station Police, which said it would follow up and determine if Alexis was a naval-based contractor. Today, Alexis's employer, the Experts, confirms the 34-year-old information technology employee worked for them for 6 months over the last year, and that his most recent background check and security clearance in June revealed no issues other than 1 minor traffic violation.
While they're being attacked.
Wow. Well, let me go down the list of some of these that I came up with. We've got DARPA has a sonic projector that was reported on in 2007. But of course, it had been around for quite some time before then. Army has something they call voice to skull. We got the Air Force using microwaves to create sounds at Brooks Air Force Base. We've got the Marine Corps with their Medusa project. We've got the State Department, as reported by the Washington Post in 2005, working on voices implanted in people's heads. We've got a couple of companies, one that has patented something called hypersound. That's American Technologies. Has also got Holosonic Research Labs, also has a patented version. So the military-industrial complex has been all over this. When you see something this wide, this is not just one little research project from one organization. And this is something that 5, 10 years ago, it was being reported on in even mainstream press like the Washington Post, and yet nobody knows about this.
Well, the people who follow the internet pretty closely, and certainly the victims of this technology, know about it. But you're right, there's been a lot of research done into how to put voices into one's head. It was found long ago that if you can put a voice into someone's head, you can do several things. If I put a voice that's foreign to your normal thought pattern in your head, that becomes harassment. And the harassment over time will make you display signs of schizophrenia. When you go and tell people that you're hearing voices, we've been patterned to turnkey see that as schizophrenia and not even look to see if there's a legitimate source for it. If I put a voice in your head that's in your voice, and if you pattern a thought, like I tell some of these victims, when you read a book, you're actually hearing your own voice in your head as you read. If I put that voice in your head, then that becomes a thought, and you'll act on those thoughts, and that's how they think that some of this is being used for subliminal control.
Wow. I know that in some of these articles I was reading on the mid-2000s, they were talking about how they were using it as the voice of God, as the voice of Allah, because they figured that it was something that they could use. They thought that people that they were going against that were Muslims were very religious, superstitious. And
well, and that was used in the field of battle. The voice of God weapon, which is actually called SQUAD, or Silent Sound Spread Spectrum, was used in the first Operation Desert Storm. That was one of those scenarios where 1,500 Iraqi soldiers disassembled their weapons, got to their knees, and surrendered to 150 Marines who didn't have enough slip ties to tie them all together because, and this was admitted, that they used Esquad to put the voice of Allah in their heads to tell them to surrender.
Wow.
Before that, in the mid to late 80s, 5 separate inmates from the Utah State Prison had written affidavits saying that they were put in solitary confinement and were experimented on with some type of electronic device that put voices in their head, and all of them claimed that they could tell the voices of the people doing the experimentation on them were responding back to their thoughts.
Wow.
So this has been going on for a while. Unfortunately, it's just not gotten any major media coverage until recently.
So they're basically setting themselves up as the ventriloquists, and we're the dummies or the zombies, right?
Well, it's like I've said in with other reporters and other shows, that guns and taxes won't control everybody.
Yeah.
Electromagnetic technology will.
Wow. Wow. And we know that too. I mean, I've said for the longest time that the IRS really wasn't so much about getting your money. It wasn't about revenue. It was really about controlling you. It was a way of offering you carrots and sticks. And of course, they're only collecting enough to pay the interest to the Federal Reserve. They were created at the same time. But this is something. So we all know that the government is into controlling us, right? And whatever they can use. And they've had very, very simple ways to control us in the past. I mean, they've got the media, they've got schools, they've got the income tax system. Everything that the government is doing is targeted towards controlling us. So of course they're going to have every branch of government working on this type of thing, because that gives them very precise control over what we're doing.
Well, and with the new revelations coming out about the NSA,
a typical error message from Microsoft telling you of a bug in your computer. Many of us get them all the time. But for some users, that error message may be a way into their computer for an elite unit inside the NSA.
This is NSA's hacking organization. It's 1,600 men and women, military and civilians, average age, mid-20s, maybe early 30s. So it's a very young, very tech-savvy organization.
The unit's called Tailored Access Operations, or TAO. New details of its activities are reported in the German magazine Der Spiegel, which cites internal NSA documents. The magazine says some of the hackers are based in this building in San Antonio. Aside from getting into a computer through an error message, Der Spiegel says TAO hackers can access so-called cookies, those tags that pop up showing a computer's favored websites. And they can redirect users to a dummy page on a site like LinkedIn or Facebook. It looks like a real page, but it's a fake one controlled by the NSA.
This is a dummy Facebook page. When you go there, what does the NSA want to find out?
One would be to simply intercept and sniff your traffic. For example, I would be logging into this page and they would be able to see, now they have my username and password, get into my account and help them in other attacks. But in this particular scenario, what they really want to do is infect my machine.
But the unit doesn't do just remote hacking. According to Der Spiegel, TAO operatives physically intercept some computers being delivered to plant spyware, and infiltrate offices and plant their own monitor cables and USB plugs onto targeted computers to collect data. An NSA official told CBS's 60 Minutes the agency was concerned enough about the connecting cables on Edward Snowden's computers that it removed those cables after he leaked NSA documents. According to Der Spiegel, this NSA hacking unit targets potential terrorists, foreign security agencies, and corporations.
From an eavesdropping perspective, this is a gold mine. If I can own your computer, if I can gain access to it and gain a foothold into it, now I have access to all of your secrets.
We contacted the NSA for response to the Der Spiegel report. In a statement, the agency said, quote, "Tailored Access Operations is a unique national asset that is on the front lines of enabling NSA to defend the nation and its allies. TAO's work is in support of
the National Security Agency has reportedly installed software in computers around the world that lets the United States government monitor those machines even if the computers are not connected to the internet. They can get to you whether you're online or not." That's according to the reporting of the New York Times, citing NSA documents, computer experts, and U.S. officials. According to those sources, the secret technology could also let the NSA launch a
Nothing
cyber
is
attack.
surprising anymore. Nothing.
No, it's not. Well, what's a little different about this is there's no flat denial by the NSA. It's basically saying to us, don't worry about it. We only use this for going after the bad guys. So if you trust them, then you trust them with listening to all of our emails and all of our texts and all of our phone calls, because according to them, while they have that stored, they don't listen and they don't read.
And they only use this technology overseas. We don't even know what this technology is.
No, but we understand that it is done wirelessly and that it enables the NSA basically to hack into computers. Now, if they could hack into a computer in Milan, Italy, or in Syria, they could hack into a computer in Hackensack, New Jersey, or in Dallas, Texas.
Hackensack,
10 years ago, when I first started writing about some of this and getting into this type of science, it did seem sci-fi and it did seem far-fetched to a lot of people, especially a lot of people thought the brain was too complex to manipulate that way. Since some of Snowden's leaked records about the NSA, most of us already knew that the NSA was listening to our phone calls.
And we were accused of being paranoid.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So now we're accused of being schizophrenic if we hear voices, but we know that there's some reality of that.
But you know, it's not too far of a stretch if they have computers big enough to collect all the data on our text, on our cell, and on our emails. And then it came to light that they admitted that several NSA agents were using NSA technology to target love interest. And it was happening so frequently that instead of HUMINT for humans intelligence or SIGINT for signals intelligence, that they actually have one that they refer to as LOVEINT. And these were agents that were actually targeting either girls they saw or met that wanted to watch them, or ex-spouses or current spouses with NSA technology. And it's happening frequent enough that it's called LOVEINT.
Well, it's always like any technology. It can be used for good or it can be used for evil. I don't know if there's any good use for putting voices in people's heads, but certainly what this reveals is the dark side of people that are involved in this. And we've seen this in the past. We've seen people very high up in the NSA, like Michael Aquino, who was a Satanist, who founded the Temple of Set. So we know that there's some very dark, I would even say Dr. Strangelove type of characters who are involved in this. So it's really not surprising that that would happen.
We cannot continue to rely only on our military in order to achieve the national security objectives that we've set. We've got to have a civilian national security force that's just as powerful, just as strong, just as well funded.